Last time we talked about the 1,000 doors, about how your unique discovery is not immediately visible. It can't be seen from wherever you're positioned now. But it begs the question, how the hell do you find it? How the hell do you take advantage of non-linear opportunities, of opportunities that lie in uncertainty? Seems difficult, it probably is. Well, welcome, firstly, to the With Joe Wehbe Podcast. This is part 2 of the 1,000 doors, or the introduction to the 1,000 doors, because that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself, and we're making our way through the big 3 ideas that was meant to kick off this podcast. And today we're going to unpack how to take advantage of non-linear pathways. So the linear, to make sure we know the difference. The linear is a clear step 1, step 2, step 3. For example, if you want to become a doctor, or you're blessed because the path is pretty straightforward. Step 1 is wherever you are in the world, get whatever marks at school or on an admission test that get you into a course, or you can study to become a doctor. Step 2, meet the requirements of that course. And step 3, I think you normally go into not an internship. No, intern. I think that's the word. Whatever. You're in a hospital, you get your part-time job. You know the process, right? You don't need me to explain it. It's linear. What's not linear is how the hell I got here. What's not linear as well is probably how you got here. So you might pause. So you might have been confused by how you can find a unique discovery, how can you use this 1,000 doors concept, what's the first door? But you've actually probably used it many times. What changes is when you're aware of this system, because now you can actually play the game instead of being played by the game. Before you realize the 1,000 doors, someone's dragging you through. Once you realize the 1,000 doors, you're the one choosing the doors you open. So how did you get here? Take a second to think about it, because you probably didn't plan to listen to some guy sit and talk called Joe. Maybe yesterday, maybe a week ago, maybe a year ago. You weren't planning on it. So how did you get here? Did a friend recommend it to you, the podcast? Do you know me personally, maybe? Did you come across it by accident? And okay, say it's the example that a friend told you about the podcast. Well, how did you actually come to know that friend? Was there a really random way of meeting there? Because I'm sure you never intended to meet that person before you knew that person existed. And that friend, how did that friend find this podcast? And you can trace it all back, and that starts to get really fun. So for me, I've talked a little bit about the experience in Nepal. Now, I never plan to start a nonprofit or join a nonprofit. I left school wanting to do film. I ended up doing stuff at university instead. And then from university, I had, unfortunately, like this unplanned year off, which I've written about, which was a bit of a kerfuffle, bit of a mess. And then some guy called Nick, who I hardly knew, I'd met at dinner one night at the pub. I saw on Facebook that he was doing this thing in Nepal. And I basically just sent him a message. What did I do? No, I shared something. I shared a fundraiser he was doing, but I didn't actually donate to top it all off. But he appreciated me sharing it on Facebook. So he messaged me and suggested we catch up before he went away to Nepal. And when we caught up, still hardly knowing this guy, I decided I wanted to go over and join him. I went over, I got sick. I lasted 3 days, the first trip in Nepal, came back and felt guilty, so I wanted to help him more. And then I became involved in the nonprofit. And then the experience with From the Ground Up, that nonprofit, taught me so much about life. I already talked about the minimum viable lifestyle, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what I learned. But it also gave me a different view of myself. It gave me the view of myself that I'm not someone who's just interested in film and a little bit interested in psychology. I'm someone who's interested in business now, and I guess maybe in leadership and in projects. And then I started a real estate business the next year. None of that makes any sense. None of it. Still doesn't. Just because I'm sitting here doesn't mean it makes sense. And I certainly did not plan that in a linear way. There were all these random doors that just opened. And that's what I mean about the non-linear. So when I think about the non-linear, is that something you just have to sit and wait happen to you? Well, I believe the answer to that is no. That's the thing. That's the important part. But we do need to position ourselves the best we can to take opportunities, learn new things. So I'll give you an example. This 1,000 doors concept started really solidifying itself to me this year, I'd say. And I decided I was going to embrace it and lean into it more. I wanted to segue into more writing and podcasting, and also wanted to meet more like-minded people who'd be interested in the same thing. So I see some guy on Facebook posting about finding a virtual assistant. And I realized that I'm actually Facebook friends with this guy that we've never met before. His name's Andrew. So I actually messaged him about a website where he can find a virtual assistant. Door 2, he pops up, starts talking to me, says thank you, and I ask him what it's for, and he talks about this podcast he's starting called Hello Stranger. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I want to start a podcast this year too. And he invites me out of nowhere to come to the launch for his podcast, which is in Bondi. And this is where I'm sitting myself. There's 2 doors here. There's don't go and just do what I normally do on the weekend or during the week. And there's going to this thing I don't know much about, which is only 2 days, which is not going to really cost anything. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So it was an easy decision. I didn't know what was going to come out of it, but I knew it would be great because I weighed it up. I saw what it was, what the cost was. There wasn't really any opportunity cost, so it was easy to opt into. But a lot of people in the same situation would be like, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know who's going to be there. Not interested. I'm thinking through a different framework. I'm like, I want to meet more like-minded people. So because of that, I find myself at this launch and I meet these 7 other people. We stayed together for 2 days without any of us knowing each other before. That was the point of Hello Stranger, Andrew's podcast, which I recommend, Andrew Reese, if you're listening. Thanks, buddy. And yeah, met these 7 other amazing people who will probably be lifelong friends, who are all incredibly like-minded. And then from there, Andrew actually recommended I do a course called the Emerging Leaders Program, Seth Godin's Akimbo workshop, where now, 2 months later, taking him up on that recommendation, I met 90 other like-minded people who live all over the world. And it's the coolest thing. I've got all these friends, they're doing all these cool things all over the world. Hopefully they're listening too. Hey, Akimbo team. Hey, EL2 cohort. And it's the most amazing thing. And then I think about, wow, where all those relationships end up. And it all comes back to helping some guy find a virtual assistant on Facebook. Now it goes one step further, because this year I was talking to a good friend of mine, Scott McEwen, about this whole, because he was involved in From the Ground Up with me, a school friend of mine who through me became involved. So again, non-linear. And we got so much out of the From the Ground Up experience. We learned so much. It gave us the confidence to go start our own businesses. And we're like, wow, how do we create that funny journey, that non-linear journey for other people? So that's where the idea for Do Hat Labs has come up. So that's basically creating group creative projects that are easy for people to get into. They don't cost much. Just like the decision to go to Hello Stranger was really a no-brainer because there was nothing I was really losing. We're trying to create that in a kind of fun group project way where you actually get to meet people where there's no real downside. And that's the thing about opening doors, is just measuring the downside, guessing what the upside is, and then just doing it and just going through doors and seeing what happens and letting the universe just plan it for you. So we set up the first project for that this year, which was a collaborative book. And hopefully if you're listening to this in the future, hello future listeners and watchers, Hopefully that book's out. I don't even know the title yet at the time I'm recording it, but hopefully you can find it and read it. It's pretty cool. On basically advice to our 18-year-old selves, and we had 8 or 9 people working on that together. And Gab, Marvin, and Jordan were all on the Hello Stranger launch with me in Bondi in Sydney, Australia. And so I wouldn't have met them without going through Andrew first. So they help launch this new kind of adventure. I don't know where it will go. But that's the part I know, if we keep doing cool projects and opening doors, that the journey will basically compound. So that's a bit of an insight, and I hope that helps into nonlinear. And if that didn't help, this next bit should really help. But it's not going to be new information, especially if you've listened to past or future episodes of this podcast, because I always end with the same thing. I say the bit about, right, there's the blog where all these ideas are discussed in blog form and where the links to the podcast episodes are. You can sign up to get them via email in the order they were made. All these podcast episodes are made in order, right, that I believe they're best consumed, blah, blah, blah. I say that bit, but then I say the part about the doors. And I say, remember that if you're listening to or watching this and then you think of someone, to remember to share it with them. Because the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to open doors for others. Now, if you look at my little journey the last however many years and all these wonderful doors that have opened in rooms I've found myself in, you'll understand that people were there every step of the way. People I couldn't have done this without. You've got Nick Abraham is one, who was there to help open a door for Nepal without realizing what he was doing. You got Andrew Reese, Hello Stranger Podcast, and all the people, Gab, Marvin, Jordan, everyone else there, and everyone else on Akimbo, that actually made the rooms great and didn't just open the doors for me. But I'm also so grateful for the people that made those rooms great to be in. And people like Scott and all these other people, amazing people, that have been there to actually provide that really rich nonlinear journey. And the stuff I've learned along that journey has become this podcast and will become my other writing and all that. So I'm really of the opinion that the best way to open doors for you is to open doors for others, because there is nothing I wouldn't do for those people now. I'll tell you that. And I hope they know that they can call on me for that. So you can start thinking about that now, but I'll remind you every bloody episode who you're going to open doors for, who you're going to be a connector for, because it doesn't take much effort. It does not take much effort. It's very small work for very big upside for you and for them. It's a huge positive sum game where everyone wins. But to start with, because I will remind you that all the time, why don't you thank someone who opened a door for you? Why don't you message them and thank them for opening a door for you? And show a little gratitude, because we don't have these rich journeys in life without the people who open doors for us, whether it's knowingly or not. Thank you. This has been the With Joe Wehbe Podcast.